Close your eyes for a moment and picture the golden glitz of 1930s Hollywood, a world drenched in spotlights and velvet curtains, where movie palaces were packed nightly with audiences swooning over the latest glamorous stars. It was an era of sweeping romances on the silver screen, of sophisticated evening wear at every premiere, and of marquee lights spelling out the names of actors so radiant that people believed they were practically celestial beings. One name in particular had the power to dazzle at first mention: Jean Harlow, the platinum-haired enchantress whose allure drew in the public like moths to a flame. Her face adorned magazine covers nationwide. Her voice, distinct and confident, crackled through newfangled talkies. Everywhere she went, heads turned. She was the quintessential blonde bombshell, a Hollywood staple whose every move the press documented. And yet, beneath the layers of perfectly coiffed hair and shimmering evening gowns, there lingered something else, a secret so disconcerting it could have jeopardized her entire career. Jean Harlow's real story begins far from Hollywood's gilded gates. Her birth name was Harleen Carpenter, and she arrived in the world on March 3, 1911, in Kansas City, Missouri. Nobody back then could have guessed that this quiet Midwestern newborn would become one of the most recognized faces of the early 20th century. Her father, a dentist by trade, and her strong-willed mother, known to some as Mother Jean, had no grand illusions about stardom. But from a young age, Harleen manifested something special, a charismatic spark that drew others to her. They saw it in the way she'd walk through a room, glancing back with a self-assured half-smile. In 1928, her mother took her to Los Angeles, partly in pursuit of a more dazzling life, and partly to allow young Harleen to soak up the new possibilities offered by the City of Angels. At that point, the adolescent Harleen wasn't itching to become an actress. She enrolled in local schools, lived a relatively ordinary teenage life for a while, but fate had other ideas. It was 1929, on a whim, that she chauffeured a friend to Fox Studios for an audition. There, her luminous presence sparked interest from casting staff who couldn't help but notice her. This chance moment was the pivot point for a destiny none of them could have anticipated. She eventually found herself signing a contract with Hal Roach Studios for the then impressive salary of $100 a week. Though she'd soon adopt the professional name Jean Harlow, the essence of Harleen Carpenter still glimmered beneath that platinum veneer. Her quick rise to stardom took shape in 1930 with Howard Hughes's Hell's Angels, a film that was initially conceived during the tail end of the silent era. After the introduction of sound technology, Hughes realized the need for a new type of star, someone who could not only be visually compelling, but who also had a resonant speaking voice suitable for the emerging talkie format. Jean was brought in to replace Greta Nissen, whose Norwegian accent proved problematic. Overnight, Jean Harlow catapulted into the public's consciousness, with her platinum hair beaming from every movie poster. Audience members, even those grappling with the Great Depression's hardships, were entranced by this new, uniquely charismatic actress. By the film's end, Hell's Angels had soared above a $2.5 million gross, a monumental figure for a period when national breadlines were more common than sold-out theaters. Harlow's star only rose from that point forward. In 1931, her workload ballooned to 6 films, the most notable being The Public Enemy with James Cagney. She played a gangster's girlfriend, a role that showcased a new dimension to her, edgy, vulnerable, but also self-assured. Critics approved, praising her screen presence and how her sensual aura matched perfectly with gangster-themed dramas. By this juncture, the major studios took notice, none more so than Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, MGM. In 1932, she officially joined MGM's roster and the stage was set for her to evolve into one of Hollywood's most bankable and adored personalities. MGM recognized her comedic talent as well as her appeal in brazen, playful roles. Red-Headed Woman, 1932, was a case in point. The storyline revolved around a social climbing woman who used her looks to ascend the social hierarchy. It was considered somewhat scandalous, but that only served to boost its box office success. Audiences couldn't get enough of Jean's fearless performances, and critics, though sometimes wary of the film's risque undertones, admitted she was unforgettable. Soon after, another film, Red Dust, 1932, paired her with Clark Gable, and the two lit up the screen. That partnership, Jean Harlow and Clark Gable, became legendary, an on-screen chemistry unmatched by most pairings of the day, each feeding off the other's natural charisma. While the public watched these cinematic escapades, a darker subtext ran through Jean's personal life. She married MGM producer Paul Byrne in 1932, which initially seemed like a stable union that might anchor her. However, tragedy struck just 2 months later when Byrne was found dead in their home, an apparent suicide. The police and studios were quick to implement damage control, offering official statements and disclaimers, but speculation persisted that something more sinister had happened. Maybe foul play, maybe secrets from Byrne's past. Jean was devastated. Overnight, the tabloids converged on her, feasting on rumors around his death, painting her as a tragic figure in a swirl of scandal. MGM's publicity team scrambled to shield her from further fallout, but it was a draining episode that left her emotionally battered. Hollywood in the 1930s, often termed the Golden Age, presented as a facade of infinite glamour, but behind the red carpet illusions stood a tightly controlled machine. A mere 5 studios, MGM, Warner Brothers, Paramount, RKO, and 20th Century Fox, dominantly shaped the product from concept to distribution. Actors were under strict multi-year contracts, their personal and public behaviors orchestrated by the studios. For a star to maintain that veneer of perfection, she had to abide by a labyrinth of guidelines: how to dress, whom to date, how to speak in interviews. So while Jean Harlow's fans saw her as the embodiment of carefree sensuality, she actually carried the burden of living up to a curated persona. She wore meticulously styled gowns, posed for carefully planned photo shoots, and made sure not to deviate from the luminous, blonde bombshell image that made her so bankable. The polished glitz overshadowed the private struggles swirling just below the surface. By 1933, Harlow appeared in Dinner at 8, a comedic ensemble film that also featured established icons like Marie Dressler and John Barrymore. She possessed an innate comedic knack, holding her own among comedic veterans. Audiences adored how she could be sultry one moment and hysterically funny the next. She also took on a satirical role in Bombshell, 1933, ironically lampooning her own star image. Meanwhile, her repeated collaborations with Clark Gable, China Seas, 1935, among them, reinforced her place in the pantheon of top-tier Hollywood royalty. Yet, swirling among the bright accolades, a rumor insinuated itself into the golden tapestry of her life. Jean Harlow had an odd smell. Initially, this whisper was contained, an anecdote among makeup artists or set staff. But the unique nature of the rumor drew others in. Hollywood was and remains a tight-knit hub of gossip. No secret stays hidden forever. People started hearing that Harlow's co-stars privately noted an unpleasant odor from her while filming close-up scenes or intimate embraces. The specifics varied. Some suggested it was pungent. Others said it was more subtle but consistent. The rumor had enough legs to become common knowledge in certain Hollywood circles. She was the radiant star with a faint, off-putting smell. How, many wondered, could such a mesmerizing symbol of beauty carry around a trait so at odds with her glamorous image? A swirl of explanations surfaced. Some whispered that she neglected personal hygiene. Others postulated it was a bizarre side effect of the chemicals she used to achieve that shocking hair color. As it turned out, the actual reason was far more tragic. Unknown to most fans, Harlow had long suffered from precarious health. She dealt with scarlet fever and meningitis in her childhood, residual afflictions that wouldn't fully vanish. More seriously, as she advanced in her career, she developed chronic kidney disease, medically known as nephritis. This condition could cause an array of complications, among them the accumulation of waste products in the body. When kidneys can't adequately filter toxins from the bloodstream, substances like urea build up, sometimes leading to a condition called uremic odor. The smell can be reminiscent of ammonia or urine. With 1930s medicine still in an infancy regarding kidney ailments, there was barely any recourse. Doctors offered mild symptom management, but there was no consistent, effective cure. Back in the 1930s, few recognized these nuances. If a star occasionally smelled bad on set, studio folks might have glibly pinned it on unprofessional grooming or the heavy costumes and sweat under stage lights. Yet, to those in close contact with Jean, it was becoming clear that a legitimate medical reason existed. Makeup artists, hairstylists, or costume fitters who worked in proximity to Harlow would mention the faint yet persistent odor. Indeed, some accounts claim that Clark Gable privately confided it to a friend, though he never said so in any formal interview. The rumor never made the headlines in bold block letters. After all, the studios had robust publicity machines to stifle any such scandal. Instead, hush-hush remarks passed from ear to ear. MGM's public relations offices were well-versed in erasing controversies. Their strategy: saturate the public with news of Harlow's comedic brilliance, her comedic synergy with Gable, her flawless sense of style. They wanted film magazines to gush about her ensembles or her witty remarks. If there was any negative chatter, they bombarded readers with glamour shots that reminded them, this is Jean Harlow, the ultimate blonde. Because the press at the time was less invasive than it is now, the rumor never erupted into the full-blown fiasco it might have been in a more modern tabloid era. The official channels, from press releases to cameo-laden parties, continued to depict Jean as a free-spirited, effervescent star at the crest of her success. Behind the scenes, however, Jean Harlow's life was steadily overshadowed by illness. On some days, she would wake up exhausted, her body swollen with fluid retention due to her malfunctioning kidneys. The vibrant facade demanded for that day's filming required a Herculean effort to maintain. She was known to take frequent breaks on set, perhaps slipping away to her dressing room to manage bouts of pain or dizziness. The odor issue, while embarrassing if openly discussed, paled in comparison to the deeper anguish she endured. The tragedy of Paul Bern's death in 1932 only amplified her stress. Despite what official statements claimed, rumors circulated that Bern's mental health was precarious and that the couple's marital dynamic was fraught with difficulties. The press used the story as another sensational angle, Harlow as the tragic widow, the bewitching blonde whose personal life was cursed. All the while, her kidney disease silently advanced, further undermining her resilience. As the science behind kidney ailments was still emerging, Harlow had limited resources. Dialysis, a life-saving therapy for kidney failure, was barely in its infancy. Available in few places and reserved for extremely experimental contexts. So while doctors told her to rest or follow special diets, None of these measured up to a complete effective solution. As days on set stretched under hot lights and long filming schedules, her body's tolerance grew weaker. The environment she worked in, the bounding, flamboyant world of epic sets, elaborate lighting, and physically demanding scenes, compounded the strain on her already compromised kidneys. Some of her colleagues empathized, admiring her stoic determination. Myrna Loy, who worked with Harlow in Libeled Lady, 1936, once lauded Jean's unwavering diligence, stating that despite any personal hardships, she was a consummate professional. Others close to Harlow sensed something was wrong, even if they didn't know exactly how critical her health was. In 1937, on the set of Saratoga, reality made itself violently clear. By then, Harlow was only 26, yet she had the fatigue of someone far older, her body plagued by a relentless undercurrent of pain. One day she collapsed, too dizzy and nauseous to carry on. At first, people chalked it up to the flu or a mild infection, but her condition spiraled downward swiftly. The studio rushed in Dr. Leland Chapman, a top-tier Hollywood physician, who discovered she was in dire kidney failure. The accumulation of toxins had reached critical mass. Though the world had advanced somewhat in medical comprehension, they were effectively powerless in the face of severe nephritis. The subsequent weeks played out like a macabre countdown. Fans worldwide, upon hearing rumors that their beloved star was gravely ill, bombarded magazines and theaters with anxious queries. How could this vivacious actress, the comedic siren from movies they'd loved, be on the brink of death? MGM tried to stifle panic, issuing statements that Miss Harlow is recovering comfortably. But behind hospital curtains at Good Samaritan in Los Angeles, her condition grew bleaker. On June 6, 1937, she lapsed into a coma. The next morning, June 7, 1937, Jean Harlow was gone. The official cause was listed as cerebral edema, a complication from the advanced kidney failure. She was merely 26. The entire film industry reeled in shock. A star of her magnitude had vanished so suddenly, it felt inconceivable. Adoring fans lined up to pay final respects. People often spoke in hushed tones about how she was too beautiful to die and about how her stardom had burned so brightly for such a short time. The press, if it looked any deeper, might have finally discovered the truth behind the rumors of her unpleasant smell. By then, though, it was overshadowed by the far bigger heartbreak of her premature passing. She left behind an unfinished performance in Saratoga, which the studio completed using body doubles and some rewrites. Audiences flocked to see her final appearance, moved by the knowledge that they would never witness another new Harlow film. Across the nation, newspapers eulogized her as the baby, the platinum blonde, or the laughing vamp. Even critics, who once branded her roles as risque, couldn't deny her luminous star power. In the aftermath, discussions raged about how the studios might have stepped in earlier or if better medical science could have saved her. Some speculated she'd faced relentless filming schedules that might have accelerated the disease's progression. Others pointed out that personal tragedies, like Burns' death, had to have added emotional toll. But for all the rationales, the stark reality was that Jean Harlow was gone, her final bow occurring long before the golden age of Hollywood truly ended. Looking back, one might ask, what if modern medicine had been available to her? Could dialysis or transplant surgery have prolonged her life, enabling her to explore dramatic roles into the 1940s, 1950s, or beyond? Might she have pivoted to direction or production, following a path akin to what other actresses eventually did once the star roles evaporated? Would she have launched comedic classics that we still watch on rainy weekends? Such questions remain tantalizing, fueling the mystique around her truncated career. The Odor rumors, once hushed whispers, hold significance mainly in how they underscore the heartbreaking reality that Jean was gravely ill. She likely wrestled with shame over a phenomenon she couldn't fully control. The blame, ironically, might lie with a condition for which the era had no real remedy, a dreadful twist that overshadowed her comedic brilliance. Had the tabloids of that time been as vicious as modern ones, the rumor might have erupted into headlines scolding her for bad hygiene, ignoring the deeper cause. Instead, the rumor festered in half-silent talk among colleagues, overshadowed by the bigger gossip of her personal drama. Only after her death did the pieces come together. The faint smell was no laughing matter, but a red flag indicating the dire state of her health. Sometimes in tributes or retrospectives, a writer will mention the rumor about Jean Harlow's smell, typically to illustrate how personal hardships remain overshadowed by the shimmering illusions of Tinseltown. It stands as a small, tragic footnote, symbolic of how her life was anything but the carefree existence fans assumed. The real-life heartbreak, the unrelenting kidney disease, the horrifying demise of her husband, these were obstacles that no glitzy premiere or shimmering ball gown could shield her from. Yet, in the face of adversity, she gave everything she had to her craft. Some might say that this unwavering dedication sped up her untimely demise. Others prefer to remember her as the unstoppable comedic force who lived fast and left a beautiful memory, as the saying goes. When she passed at 26 on that fateful June morning in 1937, an entire era paused, stunned. It felt incomprehensible that this woman, who always seemed brimming with a lust for life, was gone forever. Hollywood turned her into a posthumous icon, layering on more legends and tributes. Fans kept thronging her final resting place to pay respects, as if she might reawaken from a cinematic dream. The illusions that Hollywood built around her, ironically, had overshadowed the many red flags about her health. Maybe if the era hadn't been so fixated on illusions, if studios had let her rest more, or had truly comprehended the gravity of her kidney disease, if she'd had better medical resources, maybe the story would have ended differently. Still, the imprint she left on pop culture is indelible. Modern-day starlets and hairstylists reference her 1930s platinum look as a timeless statement. Costume designers watch her old reels to glean how to replicate that sassy style for new projects set in the golden age. Meanwhile, historians and film aficionados pore over her comedic performances, analyzing how she manipulated comedic timing with a subtle raise of her eyebrow or a well-timed pause. She was no passing fad. She had genuine comedic chops that hold up through the decades. Yet it's impossible to separate her comedic brilliance from the undertones of tragedy that shaped her final years. This duality, her comedic flair and her devastating downfall, has defined Jean Harlow's legacy. If the rumors of her odor taught Hollywood anything, it was the lesson that star power does not safeguard a person from bodily vulnerability or heartbreak, that behind even the brightest smile can lurk an anguish that's indescribably heavy. In the end, Jean Harlow's story is that of a woman trapped by the tension between her natural gifts and an industry that demanded perpetual perfection. She delivered comedic lines with a sparkle in her voice, or appeared in glamorous photo spreads that set beauty trends for years to come. But away from the bright lights, she navigated crushing adversity, scandal, heartbreak, and a body betraying her at a tragically young age. She tried valiantly to keep her secrets behind layers of perfume and personal fortitude, yet her fate, harrowingly cut short, exposed truths about that so-called golden age that producers would have preferred remain concealed. Her funeral was attended by the who's who of 1930s Hollywood. Clark Gable, Myrna Loy, William Powell, and others looked on in grief as her casket passed. She was eulogized as a tremendous comedic actress, a radiant light, and gone too soon. For fans, sorrow mixed with confusion. Many had heard she was ill, but few understood the severity. In an era lacking robust tabloids and round-the-clock news, many heard the tragic announcement by reading the morning paper or hearing a friend mention it on the street. The resulting sense of shock was massive. Decades have passed since she breathed her last, yet her movies remain staples of classic film circuits, serving as constant reminders of that luminous presence she brought. Each time a new viewer sees Bombshell or Red Dust, they rediscover a woman who was vivacious, fearless, and comedic. Some might later learn the behind-the-scenes revelations, how she battled kidney disease, how the rumor of her smell was an unfortunate side effect of a tragic medical condition, and their amazement deepens. Suddenly, the glamorous star transforms into a figure of empathy and respect, someone whose brilliant comedic facade housed a resolute spirit. Understanding that adversity gives her comedic gifts an even sharper edge. Today, her memory is a tapestry woven from shimmering film rolls. Tabloids that painted her personal life in sensational strokes and the abiding rumors about an odor no one dared mention publicly. But her memory is also a living testament to fortitude in a tough, often unforgiving industry. We marvel at her comedic timing, her platinum brand, her synergy with Clark Gable. We empathize with the heartbreak she must have endured, the sorrow of losing a husband, the confusion of a body that refused to cooperate, and a system that demanded never-ending radiance. We realize, too, that her iconic hair and glowing face on film's silver surface were merely illusions that hid a fierce battle fought at the cellular level every day. What remains, then, is a deep admiration for what Jean Harlow accomplished in such a short time. She became the prototype for the comedic, sultry blonde, a mold countless actresses have since tried to emulate. She brought spice and humor to her roles in an era still navigating the novelty of sound films, proving that comedic timing and a luminous persona could enchant audiences worn down by economic depression. She loved wholeheartedly, soared to the apex of stardom, overcame personal scandal, and faced relentless rumors with a poise that belied her youth. And yes, she bore a condition that, in that era, was a near-certain death sentence. Perhaps the old rumor, the faint, perplexing smell, ends up illuminating the real tragedy. Behind the glimmering facade of a comedic goddess, a mortal woman battled an incurable disease few understood. If you ever pick up a vintage film magazine or watch a black and white marathon on late-night television, you might glimpse her carefree grin or her bright eyes that catch the light just so. That's Jean Harlow, forever 26, forever enthralling, dancing between comedic lines and lethal secrets, exuding an unspoken promise that the curtain call for her character was nowhere close. Yet time proved otherwise. Her final bow was heartbreakingly early, a reminder that sometimes behind the curtain of stardom, life's frailty quietly asserts itself, unheeding of paparazzi and red carpets. What can we learn from Jean Harlow's extraordinary story? Maybe that illusions, no matter how gorgeously constructed, can never entirely banish human vulnerability. That comedic glamour can obscure heartbreak only so long, and that, in the end, perhaps our greatest testament lies not in how well we preserved a public facade, but in how resolutely we carried on in spite of it all. Jean Harlow's grace under such conditions emerges as the real legacy. She may have succumbed to her illness, but not before leaving an indelible imprint, proof that a few short years of brilliance can light up cinematic history for generations. She was a living paradox, luminous yet burdened, comedic yet tormented, fragile in health yet strong-willed enough to keep smiling for the cameras. That paradox enthralls us still. Her story stands for all who find themselves trying to maintain grace under the glare of public expectation, for anyone who's faced battles hidden from the outside world's view. And though the rumor about her odor once threatened to tarnish her reputation, we now see it as a symbol of the hidden battles she faced, battles that eventually claimed her life. In the end, Jean Harlow, the blonde bombshell, lives on in the flickering frames of classic cinema, a testament to both the ephemeral illusions of stardom and the enduring power of the human spirit.